Hi, I'm Ron and welcome to PopScicle, where I talk about popular culture, science, and everything in between. In case you're new to this channel, I'm Ron. I'm a biology teacher and researcher, but I'm also a student of popular culture. And so that's what my channel is all about. I try to combine my interests in popular culture and science so as to make science more exciting and fun for everyone. Happy Pride Month! And there's a lot to celebrate, of course, and that's why I wanted to contribute to the celebration of Pride Month by airing this particular episode, which is my recommended queer Pinoy films. I'm doing a special project along with some other people, and I won't say too much about it yet. But it does involve coming up with a list of essential must-see Pinoy films. And of course, when I was coming up with that list, I noticed that a lot of the films that I had, or not a lot, but several of the films that I had in my list are queer films, LGBTQ films. And so I wanted to highlight that given that this is Pride Month. And I would also, of course, always like to champion Pinoy films because they are not enjoyed as much as they should be, not as appreciated as they should be, even here in the Philippines, which is sad, of course, because we should be celebrating our own cinema, not just because it's our cinema. I don't advocate for, fake or false patriotism, supporting our products just for the sake of doing that, but because Pinoy cinema is actually excellent. Ever since the first Filipino production in 1919, and yes, that means we just celebrated our 100th year as a global cinema, as a national cinema, I should say. A few years ago, we've been producing so many good films. In fact, a lot of scholars agree that we've gone through at least three golden ages, and several of those films, I believe, that played a big role or were part of the gems that Pinoy cinema have are actually LGBTQ films. And so I'd like to highlight some of them. I can't possibly include all LGBTQ films that have come out. That's impossible. And there are undoubtedly a lot of good ones that I haven't watched and so won't be on my list. Let me mention one. Nick De Ocampo came up with a documentary called Oliver, which is widely celebrated in the Philippine industry and among cineasts in the Philippines, but I haven't watched it. I will rectify that very soon. I plan to watch it. But until then, it won't come up in my list because I haven't watched it. So these films that will come out in my list today are those that I have watched and thoroughly enjoyed, and I think are essential viewing to Filipino film goers. So if you haven't watched these, I really suggest that you do because they're amazing and they say a lot about the LGBTQ community in several different ways, very interesting ways. By the way, this is not a ranked list, so don't expect something like a top 10. In fact, I have less than 10 films that I'd like to highlight, but they are sort of grouped together into themes, some of them at least, just to ease the conversation. And please feel free to comment below. Tell me what if there are films that you think I should watch that are in this theme, the LGBTQ theme or the queer film theme. What some scholars have also called pink films, actually. And yeah, let's make this a conversation. But let's proceed to my list of highly recommended queer films in Philippine cinema. Let's start with two that we can say are coming-of-age films. These are precious coming-of-age films. And these are Ang Pagdadalaga ni Maximo Oliveros and Ang Huling Chacha ni Anita. Ang Pagdadalaga ni Maximo Oliveros is the older film, and probably a lot more people are familiar with it, at least those people who've been watching Philippine cinema for quite some time. It is definitely one of the most highly regarded Pinoy films of all time, directed by Aureo Solito and written by the brilliant Michiko Yamamoto, who has written so many other gems in Philippine cinema. And it's not something that I can say is limited to local audiences only. Yes, local audiences love it, but international audiences do as well. It was the entry of the Philippines to the Academy Awards for the Best International Feature Film category, then called the Foreign Language Film category. But aside from that, it was actually one of the nominees in the Independent Spirit Awards for Best Foreign Language Film. And so that tells you that the international community actually embraced it. It's a great film. It is about, or a coming of age story about a young man who is openly gay and is living in a community where he is widely accepted, and that's very refreshing because I'm pretty sure that you know that in a lot of LGBTQ films, the queer person is usually harassed, usually abused, usually insulted a lot, right? But here he is surrounded by a community that's very accepting, and his family, in fact, is very accepting. Not just tolerant, but very accepting and loving. You may think, oh, that's unrealistic. It's not. Actually, in a lot of Philippine communities, this is a normal situation. And it's something that I think we should celebrate more. This character is falling in love with a policeman, and that's the main plot of the story. And Nathan Lopez, the lead character, the lead actor who plays Maximo Oliveros, who I wish would see more. Right now, he is sort of stuck in television and not doing the caliber of work that he has shown he is capable of with this film. I hope that we get to see him more. Nathan Lopez turned in a really great, endearing performance that really makes us feel his struggles. Despite being loved and accepted in society, he is falling in love, or he thinks he is falling in love. And all of us know how difficult that would be, right? Especially for someone so young. I think he was in his early teens or even before when the character. And so it's not an easy thing to fall in love. But Nathan Lopez handled it gracefully, and so did the script and the direction. And that's why it's such a gem. It's such a well-regarded film. Not just an LGBTQ film, but it's a well-regarded film in general in the Philippines. The other coming-of-age film, Ang Huling Chacha ni Anita, which came out in 2013, is not as celebrated as Ang Pagdadalaga ni Maximo Oliveros, partly by virtue of being younger, but it is celebrated by a lot of people in the industry and among fans. The film stars Therese Malvar as a young girl who is awakening in terms of her awareness of the world and her sexuality, and part of that is being attracted to the woman who has come home to their barrio, played by Angel Aquino. Who wouldn't fall in love with Angel Aquino, right? And so the story of the film revolves around her growing up with friends and also realizing that she's falling in love with this woman and how she journeys through that. It's a comedy with a dash of drama, and it's such a joy to see Therese Malvar in this role of a child awakening and blossoming in her feelings and realizing that she likes certain things that are not expected of girls her age. And Therese Malvar is now a well-respected actress, probably one of the finest actresses in her generation. And even here in this film, which I think is her first, I'm not 100% sure about that, but she is already very good in this film, and now she's considered to be really, really excellent by her peers in the industry, particularly in the indie film industry. And it's an endearing look at how life in a small community where gossip runs amok and people are judged very quickly for what they've done in the past can shape the mentality and the trajectory of a girl who's just coming into her own and finding herself. So these first two films that I highlighted are coming of age films. Let's go to a film that's the opposite. It's not coming of age, but it has a character that's already in the twilight of his years. And here I'm talking about Buakaw. Buakaw is directed by June Lana, and it was also the entry of the Philippines in 1 year for the International Feature Film category. And as I had said in my previous video, which I'm providing a link to somewhere above, Buakaw, I think, actually had a pretty good chance of being shortlisted. It ultimately wasn't, but I believe that there was a lot of buzz surrounding it, and part of that was that it is an LGBTQ film, and it's also about a dog. So it's a good combination of two things that usually make people, film goers, turn and watch the film. Both are endearing to a certain extent. And add to that the fact that it stars the late Eddie Garcia, the late great Eddie Garcia, in one of his best roles, one of his most sensitive, touching performances in his long, storied career. And here he stars as a gay old man who's trying to live his life true to himself, but at the same time going on this journey with his very faithful animal companion, the dog. So as you can probably imagine, it is a tearjerker. There are a lot of very dramatic scenes here that involve the both of them and the people around them. And it's one of those films that really shows you the power of that relationship between a man and his animal, but also how love transcends gender and species and age. So if you think about it, it's really about transcending boundaries and really living your truest self, which are ultimately great messages to have in any film, but particularly in a film that talks about the queer community. I believe that Wakao is available on Netflix, so it should be easy for you to watch it, and I do highly recommend that you do. Now, the two next films that I'd like to recommend both star the king of comedy, Dolphy himself. Those watching who are not Filipino might not know who Dolphy is. Dolphy, for a time, particularly during the 70s, 80s, 70s to 90s, actually prior to the 70s, I should say, he was regarded in the Philippines as the best comedian. He's witty, he's smart, he's sharp, and he has great comedic timing. And also, he was known for playing a lot of gay roles. He himself was not gay. Um, but he was so good at playing these gay roles. And there's a certain amount of respect that he puts into it. Yes, it could go overboard. It could be overly flamboyant, like for example in films like Pacifica Falayfay. But I think there's a nuance to his performance, and I'm sure a lot of critics would agree, compared to how other people would play it so broad, particularly in these two films that he made, that I am highlighting now. Let's start with Ang Tatay Kong Nanay, directed by Lino Broca, no less than the great Lino Broca, who is widely considered to be the best Filipino director of all time by a lot of people. Not necessarily everyone, but by a lot of people, including people in the international film community. He is most known for Maynila sa mga kuko ng liwanag, Insyang, and several other gems that usually star Philip Salvador, probably his muse. This film is about Dolphy being a drag queen. He's actually a drag queen, so it's really refreshing to see the drag culture being represented in a 1970s movie, when drag culture has become popular in the last 5-10 years because of RuPaul's Drag Race and Pose and all of that. But in the 70s, we already had a film starring Dolphy, one of the most popular actors of his generation, playing a drag queen who inherit is probably not the right word, who is forced by circumstance to adopt a young child, who is played by Nino Mulak. If Dolphy is known as the comedy king, Nino Mulak is the precocious actor who was the best of his age. No other child actor, I think, came close to matching Nino Mulak's charisma, uniqueness, nerve, and talent. Sorry for including that, but I had to. I just had to since we're talking about drag queens anyway. But Nino Mulak did not play a drag queen. He played the young kid who again was adopted by Dolphy's character. And Dolphy, the character of Dolphy is also just like Maximo Oliveros, is accepted by the community. You won't see here a lot of people throwing insults at him and abusing him. He's pretty well regarded in his small community as one of the leading drag queens, and he has a lot of friends. He's surrounded by a lot of love from family and friends. But that's the interesting thing about it. He doesn't have to hide it, but he feels like he has to. He feels like he has to protect the young child. not only to protect the young child from possible ridicule, because this is, even though he's being supported and he's being loved by his community in general, there are hints. There are hints that it's not a perfect society. It's just like a real society in the Philippines. There are people who will hurl insults at him, and he's afraid that his child will be the same by virtue of his of their connection. But also because there's a fear in him that he won't be accepted by this young kid who is come to love as his own. And so that film is about that struggle, that internal struggle in him, and then the external struggle that comes in when, slight spoiler alert, the mother of the kid comes to claim him. It's drama. There's a lot of comedy in it because it's Dolphy, and I'd like to think that a lot of his lines are improvised. There's that, it feels like that, and that's how Dolphy's comedy feels like. But there is a lot of drama. There will be a lot of tears, especially because Nino Mulak is so good at inducing tears. But Dolphy probably turns in one of his best performances here. That is matched probably only by the second of his two films that I would like to highlight, and that's Markova, Comfort Gay, which came decades later. It was well regarded when it came out. I think it was during the one edition of the Metro Manila Film Festival, and he turns in a brave bravura performance as the older version of a character who was a comfort gay, meaning he was used by Japanese officers during the short period of Japanese occupation in the Philippines for sex, the same way that sex slaves, women were used as sex slaves during that time by Japanese officers. There were certain gay people who were used in the same way, and they're called comfort gays, and Markova is one such character. The character is played by two of Dolphy's sons in two different stages of age. But when he gets older, it's Dolphy who plays it, and part of it is looking back at his tragic past and looking forward to a better future in his advanced age, but at the same time, of course, living all of that haunted past in his life, and living the scars of the past in his present. And just that description alone should tell you how much heaviness there is in this film. But someone of Dolphy's caliber is able to bring it beyond just a subfest, a tragic subfest, and elevate it to something that's very, very human. And I think that's one of the greatest powers of Dolphy as a performer. He's so human. It's not fake. I mean, the performances that he turns in are not fake, which is saying a lot given that he's not gay. But he played it so well and so respectfully. And so these two films are highly recommended, especially if you'd like to see how good the king of comedy, Dolphy, is in dramatic roles. The fifth film I'd like to highlight is T-Bird at Ako, which stars Vilma Santos and Nora Honor. Or Nora Honor and Vilma Santos, just to satisfy both sides. A lot of you who are listening to this right now would likely be familiar with the conflicts, the tension between the two camps. You have the Vilmanians who support the star for all seasons, Vilma Santos, and we have the Noranians who support the superstar, Nora Honor. Both are excellent actresses. I won't take a side, not in this video at least. I have my favorite. I won't tell who it is. I have a preference. But both are excellent actors, legends in Philippine cinema. They're like, this film is the equivalent of Whatever Happened to Baby Jane in the Philippines. Just not as campy and not as scary and not as delirious. But yeah, it's two titans of the Philippine film industry coming together. And it's a great film. It's a damn great film. It's a law film, essentially. It spends a lot of time in courtrooms because Nora Honor's character is a lesbian lawyer. And there's certain sexual tension between her and Vilma Santos's character. And, Okay, I'll say it. I'll say it. I might as well say it. I'm more of a Vilmanian than a Noranian. Don't don't hate me for that, Noranians. But in this particular film, I will say that Nora Honor had a much meatier, stronger role than Vilma Santos did. I'm not saying that Vilma Santos turned in a bad performance. She never turns in a bad performance. But there was much more highlight on Nora Honor's character and the struggles that she goes through. Um, but both are excellent. And there's another film where they came together, but I think this is the highlight of that collaboration between two. And unlike Joan Crawford and Betty Davis, they do not hate each other. They work really well together, and they're amigas, they're friends actually in real life, and that showed on screen. But yes, this is not so common where you have a strong uh, character, a strong female character who's lesbian, but it's not played for laughs. It does play a role, definitely an important role in the film. Okay, but what's shown here is that this character is a no nonsense, steadfast character with a lot of conviction. Conviction both in terms of her profession and in terms of her personal life, and so it's a role worth celebrating, and it's played to perfection by Nora Honor. The next two films are comedies, decades apart. One is from the 80s, one is from the 2010s. Let's talk about the one from the 80s first. It's a personal, this is a very personal choice in the sense that I don't think a lot of people remember it as fondly as I do. And it is a remake of a film, of another film that was from much earlier, from the 50s, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. This is Jack and Jill. I'm talking about the 80s version, which stars Sharon Cuneta and Herbert Bautista, who are siblings. Sharon Cuneta is a woman who is inclined to like women, fellow women, and Herbert Bautista is a man who's inclined to like men. And there's a lot of cross-dressing involved, especially when it comes to Herbert Bautista's character. And his role is the very flamboyant gay character. Um, wouldn't sit well with everyone in the present times, in the woke, quote unquote woke times, and probably the transitions at the end. I don't mean biological surgical transitions, not in that sense, but the conversions at the end might also not sit well with the mentality right now that you don't need to change that, and definitely I agree. Okay, but it is a laugh trip. It's comedy. It's comedy gold. And I remember having watched this very early, like when I was still young, and up till now I still remember a lot of scenes in it. It's probably because of the excellent acting of Herbert Bautista, the very committed acting of Herbert Bautista and Sharon Cuneta. I do suggest you check it out for yourselves and then judge it accordingly based on your own perspectives. I enjoyed it a lot when I watched it. The last time I watched it was, I don't know, probably more than 20 years ago. If I were to watch it again now, I'm pretty sure that I'd still like a lot of it, but probably not all of it. I don't know. I'll probably give it another shot if I manage to find a way to do that. But I do recommend that you try it out for yourselves and then you judge it yourself. The second comedy film that I'm highlighting is much more highly regarded and widely celebrated. And this is a film that I think there's not too many negative things you can say about it unless you really don't like that type of film. And this is Zombadings 1, Patayin sa Shokot si Remington. It's one of the best, funniest titles of all time in Pinoy cinema. And yes, there's a promise of a sequel in the title alone because it calls itself Zombadings 1, but we have yet to see a sequel, which a lot of its fans are eagerly awaiting. It's directed by Jade Castro and stars Martin Escudero in a breakthrough role. One of the funniest, most committed roles that I've seen from someone of that age. And he deserved a lot of the accolades that he got. He was so natural. I don't know what his sexual orientation in real life is. We're talking about the real actor, Martin Escudero. But he played gay so well. He played straight to ghost gay so well. Um, not in a cringy, insulting way, but in a realistic way that still played for laughs. And one key scene there is the dance scene, which you have to see to believe, with all of these colors flying out from him, and his discovery, the gradual discovery of him being actually gay, partly because of a quote unquote curse. And again, that is played for both laughs and the irony, which becomes clearer later in the story. And it's a tongue-in-cheek film. It's really, really funny. Um, it talks about the place of gays in human society, how gays are seen. The curse comes from him insulting gays very early on. Like when he was very young, he was the type of kid who would throw insults at gay people that he'd see. And it's karma. But then it's so much more than that. And there are zombies, by the way. Did I forget to mention that there are zombies in this film? It's actually a zombie movie. It's actually a gay zombie movie. And the zombies aren't really frightening. Don't expect Shaun of the Dead level comedy zombies. They're not that scary. But, and in fact, we can say that it's not really central to the plot. It's really more about the discovery of this character, of his true self, even as he goes through the curse and all of this magic, and seances. One of the funniest scenes in the movie is the seance, and it's so resonant with the culture. In fact, that's one of its strengths and one of its weaknesses. Weaknesses only in terms of getting an international audience to be invested in it, because there's so many cultural references that have to do with Filipino culture that won't easily translate to foreign language. Um, a lot of the humor is very Filipino centric. So I don't know. I'd love to know how a foreign film fan appreciates and understands the humor. And one other thing is, and this shows you how really serious it is in fleshing out this entire gay culture in this movie. When you buy the official DVD, you have the option of using gay lingo subtitles. Meaning you can watch the entire movie with the subtitles being in the gay language, or backlist, that's what they call it in this particular film. So it's really, really amazing. Really, really amusing. So just for that alone, it's worth buying the original DVD, which I have. Haven't watched it in quite some time. I plan to. Maybe I will rewatch it with those subtitles. But yeah, Martin Escudero is a great find. Again, just like Nathan Lopez, I wish he'd be doing more roles that he deserves, because he's such a good actor. But I think right now he's also stuck in television, and that's a sad story for a lot of the best actors in the Philippines. They eventually become limited to small television roles, and they're not given enough opportunities to shine in cinema anymore. Finally, the last film that I'd like to highlight is the one that's most recent. This one just came out last year, and it came out in the heat of this BL industry. The anyone who has not been living under a rock or has been actively neglecting that part of Filipino culture would know that the 2020s, during the pandemic, exploded with BL content, or boys love content. It's undeniable how strong it is. You have so many television shows ranging from very, very high quality to very, very low quality coming out, and then you have movies coming out. And the movie that proclaims itself to be the first BL movie is The Boy Foretold by the Stars. The Boy Foretold by the Stars is directed by Dolly Dudu, and it's quite a refreshing take on queer people because it's set in high school. So it's really BL, and it's really a love story of young people. And romance, teen romance is something that's been done in the Philippines from the very, very beginning. But there aren't a lot that are about gay people in high school. And it's really, really refreshing, especially when it throws into the mix the fact that the high school is a Catholic school. Thankfully, the story isn't about Catholic schools oppressing gay students. In fact, there's none of that. There are bullies among the students, but the administration itself is very friendly very tolerant. Well, tolerant is not really a word we'd like using in this context, but it doesn't oppress their students, so that's a good thing. But the way um, the gay life weaves into the culture of the Catholic school, particularly this retreat type of activity, which goes by another name, but I'm pretty sure that it's patterned after the same retreat that I went to in my high school, which is the same high school that Dolly Dulu went to. So I'm pretty sure that that's the inspiration, without naming that particular type of retreat. There's that undercurrent of the whole faith thing, but I think it's played really well, because normally you'd expect that, you know, the Catholic administration would be banning gay activity, gay people, but there's none of that here. But also because it's so well done. So well done in terms of bringing out the kilig. Those of you who are not from the Philippines might not have heard of the term kilig unless you've been watching a lot of romantic films from or TV series from the Philippines. Kilig doesn't have a direct translation in the English language, but it's like the butterflies in your stomach or the goosebumps that you get when you feel enamored of someone, when you feel like you have a crush on someone, or something happens that makes you feel that even more. That's kilig, and there's a high amount of that here, because it's directed really well. The scenes are played out really well, and the two lead characters are very endearing. It's a simple story about fate. That you can get that from the title, about relying on signs for you to find your significant other, but then at a certain point realizing, do I really have to do that? Can't I just rely on my own feelings? And it plays on that theme really well. If the BL craze will result in films of this quality in terms of acting, direction, screenwriting, and all of the other, even the technical elements, then I'm all for it. There are other BL themed films that came out. In fact, there are several that were that are movie versions or movie sequels of TV series like Hello Stranger, for example. But so far, this is the highest quality one. Fans of the Game Boys TV series, like myself, are eagerly awaiting the Game Boys movie that will be coming out in the end of July. Hopefully, it continues the excellence in quality that we had seen in the TV series, and who knows, it might be another landmark gay themed movie, and it might be one for this current generation of millennials and young people who are discovering themselves and finding true love in the midst of all this chaos and all of this uncertainty. Certainly, we need more films that celebrate love in all shapes and sizes and all forms and in all colors, right? And for me, these are the 9 films that are very good places to start. Some of them are classics directed by renowned directors like Lino Broca. Others are pretty new and have come out of a very, very new trend, the BL trend. Some are comedies, some are hardcore, tear-jerking dramas. Then you have the coming of age stories also. Regardless of that, it's all about celebrating life and love, again in all colors. So go out there and get a copy of this movie somehow and watch them, and let's look forward to more. Hopefully we'll see more, because there's a lot of stories to tell. So if you like this episode and you'd like to see more about such themes and about pop culture and science in general, don't forget to subscribe to PopScicle so that you may be alerted to new content in the future. See you again next time.